What's up, everybody? We're back. Welcome back. Welcome back to Everybody's a Critic with Jamarco Shaw. That would be me. I'm Jamarco Shaw. It's good to see you. It's been a while. We took a few weeks off, mainly due to some birthday shenanigans. I just recently celebrated my 31st birthday, so happy birthday to me. But I'm glad to be back here, man. I missed talking movies with y'all, and I was looking forward to this one specifically because it's another great Edgar Wright film that we're doing today. But before we get into all that, it's just rolling dolo solo, two of us, me and Steven Dinkins. Everybody, say hello, Steven. What up? What's happening?
Hello, Steven. What's up?
Yes, yeah, everybody's busy, but everybody can't be here, so I'm more than happy to just talk about this movie with you, Steven. And we won't keep you guys. We'll be try to be out of here soon because we're talking about Edgar Wright's fourth film. A couple years after Scott Pilgrim, he took a break, and he wanted to complete his Cornetto trilogy. We talked about Hot Fuzz. We talked about Shaun of the Dead, but now we are taking the Golden Mile. We're talking about The World's End, which came out in 2013, August 25th, 2013, which kind of sucks because I think This Is the End came out the same year. So
Mm.
not a lot of people, well, it's gotten a lot of favor now, but as far as Edgar Wright films, you don't really hear this one talked about as much. And I think it's a shame because this movie is great. Um, Takes a little bit of a, I would say it's one of Edgar Wright's more mature films, one of his darker stories, and it gets more relevant as you get older. Um, Stories about starts off as just a reverse coming of age story, talking about this guy Gary King, played by Simon Pegg, of course, who also co-wrote the script. And Gary King's a loser, uh, in 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 many words or less. He he had this childhood dream of completing this infamous bar crawl named the World's End, of course, hitting 12 bars, 12 pints with his mates. Andy Knightley, played by Nick Frost. We have Steven here, played by Patty Constantine, who you remember from Hot Fuzz as one of the twin cops. And then we have Eddie Marson, who plays Peter, who's kind of like the I would say the wimp of the group. Everybody has that one in a group where they're like, who's this guy? So Peter fills that role. I remember Eddie Marson. He's been everywhere. He's one of those character actors you see everywhere. But I remember him. I
Mm.
remember seeing him in Hancock. He was
He was
the
like one
main.
of the ones. Yeah, or the
Yeah,
main
he
one.
was the one with the hook hands.
Yeah, yeah. So in recent years, a role that I've always respected him as an actor, but after Ray Donovan, like what one
Mm-hmm.
hell of a character. In his portrayal of a man like suffering from Parkinson's.
Mm.
Um, it was really powerful to see, the approach he took to that, especially how that related to his like career as a boxer.
Oh, shout out to Eddie Marson. I have not seen Ray
Yeah,
Donovan, but it's on my list. I have like a
highly
long
recommended.
list
Yeah.
of TV shows. And speaking of somebody who's been in everything, Martin Freeman rounds out the group as Oliver O-Man. And of course, everybody knows Martin Freeman from Black Panther to Fargo to Sherlock on BBC. So a very, very fun, stacked cast of character British actors here. And all these guys, they grew up in this town, Newton Haven, where they completed this. Well, they didn't complete the World's End, but Gary has been hell bent on finishing this, although he's already in AA and he owes people money. He's scamming, he's scheming. And they return to their hometown to find out that something's a little bit off. And turns out that something is the town that they once knew has been invaded by gooey robot aliens. Which leads me to this question, Stephen. Have you ever gone back to like a place where you've grown up and something was a little bit different, something felt off?
Well, I do still live in the town that I grew up in. So I don't know. So really, I guess more so it's me now aging and being like, oh hey, I remember this used to be a thing. This used to be a thing. Used to be was a time. So there are quite a few things in Memphis that like aren't the way that they used to be. Some places, for better and for worse, some places have been redeveloped. There was like this abandoned Sears Tower that's actually not too far from me
Mm-hmm.
that it used to be kind of like not to say an urban legend, but just one of those things where people would talk about sneaking in there, breaking in and whatnot. And then in the past, um, not even fully a decade, it's been completely revitalized and is now called the Crosstown Concourse, which it's basically a mall, but people also live there. It's like a high rise building. So on like
Right,
the upper,
right.
basically as a civilian, you can only go so many places. Then past a certain point, you have to like have a key or something.
Yeah, and I related. I've had stories like that. I grew up in L.A. I grew up in California, and I was like 10 when I first moved there, and then I went back in like 2018, and everything was different. Well, everything was more expensive, first of all, but like your old town is like they change the house, they change, your favorite restaurant don't taste the same. It's kind of like this movie is pretty much the dangers of living in the past and what
Yeah.
nostalgia can do to you. So, with that being said, let's get into some great scenes here. I wrote down some of my favorite scenes. The bathroom fight. Uh,
Yes.
well, yes, and I believe that's at. I wrote all the bars down, and we're going to get into what the bars mean later. That's at the cross hands, where you know everything's on the shit. Gary has let it slip that his he pretended that his mom died just to get his best friend Andy, played by Nick Frost, to go with him on his trip. And it's great. It's funny in this movie throughout the Cornetto trilogy. We've always seen Nick Frost as the wild card, the you know the fuck up of the group. In Hot
Right.
Fuzz, he's an idiot. Shaun of the
Lovable
Dead, he's an
idiot.
idiot.
Yeah.
In this one, the roles are reversed,
And
and
he's the
we
straight man.
see Nick Frost. Yeah, Nick Frost is the responsible married adult, and Simon Pegg as the loose cannon wild card, drinking, smoking, just a man with deeply personal problems. And when we get to this bathroom fight, we've already seen Gary is worse. He lied. He put Peter on his the car is still the same. Like everything about him is still the same. He has not left 1993 or whatever. He's like, oh yeah,
Right.
this is the same car. Yeah, it's the same. I just have to change the engine, but yeah, it's the same car, same piece. Yeah. Oh, this mixtape is good. Yeah, I remember
Changed
this
literally
song.
everything
Oh,
about the car except like the shell.
oh yeah, this is
Because
the
he's
this
a
is the
shell of
same
a
mixtape.
man.
Wait, this is the same mixtape. There's
Uh,
kind of things where you're just kind of like the like because we do that. Everybody's a little guilty of nostalgia tripping. It happens. I have my '90s playlist I go back to, but
yeah.
you
But
know,
you also
but
generally go back to those on more updated services as opposed to the same cassette from 20 years ago?
exactly using the same car note to get out of a ticket. But see, now we're just getting everywhere. But this all leads up to the cross hands fight, where we first find out that the gang is the Gary's suspicions about this town have been confirmed, and there's this great fight with these punks, these robot youngsters, and it's just fun. You never really see kind of like middle aged men in martial arts scenes, and it's just choreographed beautifully. I think Nick Frost said he was inspired by wrestling. His character is a lot of like wrestling moves and grappling,
Yeah.
and because he was a rugby player in the story, so
Mhm.
it's just great. And it contains one of my favorite jokes in the whole movie with WTF. What
Oh, yeah,
the
I
fuck
actually wrote
does
that as a quote.
WTF
Yeah.
mean?
What the fuck? Oh, right.
Oh yeah, that's right. The writing is great. Just it's mile a minute. Just everything you love about like Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz, and like I think after Scott Pilgrim he leveled up in terms of just writing jokes and choreographing fights and kind of making his own weird twisted vision of what the world is. And it because to be honest, the movie kind of moves at a slower pace than the first two, so it
Yeah.
takes a while to build up to the thrill of it all.
Mhm.
So as opposed to Shaun of the Dead and Hot Fuzz that are pretty much goofy mile a minute, this one is a little bit more personal, a little bit more I wouldn't say serious, but it deals with more dramatic themes. But once you get the alien payoff, it's
It
like
just takes
right
off
off
from
to the
there.
races. Yeah, it just
Yeah.
takes off. And
Another thing I wanted to point out about the bathroom
mhm.
scene also is that, like, um yeah, it was very much an Edgar Wright scene, but I loved how it kinda played out like a one take, except for, the signature whip pan effect. Like, that was
Hmm.
just the only way that you could really tell that there were cuts in the scene at all, just
Hmm.
because it would just highlight, one specific pairing because, the group of punks that they were squaring off with, there one for each of the friend group. So, you would see, like, Andy getting thrown into the bathroom stall and, fight a
Hmm.
guy that way, and then just boom, then just cut to Gary, then cut to Steven, cut to, so it was really cool to witness, and definitely, I agree with your point about, like aging men who had a little bit of combat experience, just because, like, they were like blocking and everything. They were just,
Yeah,
it
they
was
knew. I
very
mean,
well done. Yeah,
I assume you grew up in the UK. You go to these pubs. You got to get into a few, bar fights every now and then.
right.
So I would assume what we didn't see is these guys getting getting their asses kicked and kicking some
Oh,
ass.
of course, yeah,
Yeah, come on.
exposition.
Bar crawling in London is nuts. Okay, my next favorite scene is right after this. They have a great montage with the Doors, Alabama song, and where they have to pretend, that they're drinking and completing the Golden Mile because the robots starting to get a little suspicious. And it's a great song. First of all, I'm never mad when the Doors are involved in anything. So and it kind of plays on that music syncopation that Edgar Wright loves. With he does it in Scott Pilgrim. We'll talk about it when he gets to Baby Driver, but it's all syncing up to the music, like drinking.
Yep.
It's very fun and very rhythmic, and I love the way that scene is filmed. And it is very Invasion of the Body Snatchers, this movie, and
Hmm.
very Stepford Wives. And I just love just anytime there's just a creepy stare is great. Um, and my next scene, another well, there's another fight, and we didn't talk about. Excuse me, I got something in my eye, but there's another thing we didn't talk about, and another character we didn't talk about is the great Rosamund Pike as Sam, who is Oliver's sister, and has caught the eye of both Gary and Stephen. Although Gary's delusional, he only hit it once, but Stephen he's in it for the long run. So this is the opportunity if we could talk about how Rosamund Pike is how amazing she is in this.
Yeah. And I mean, she doesn't have the largest role. I mean, it's significant, for what it is, and she definitely plays an important part in like realizing what is happening. I also loved the scene where she was forced to believe that, things were going on just because Gary tried to take her aside and she's like, "No, you're not gonna shag me in the bathroom again." Or the loo, I don't know, whatever you want to
The
word
Lou, yes, as they say
use.
in the
Yeah,
UK,
yeah. The disableds, really.
the disabled,
The
yes,
disabled
yes.
bathroom, yes. Um, and she slaps him, and then she goes and talks to her friends that Gary is already suspicious of being, the robot aliens, and they're speaking in unison. And it's just, it's really because of the messenger. I feel like had Steven come to her with it on the front end, which he didn't really get the chance to, that she might have
Mhm.
been a little more willing to listen. But she's like, "Oh my god, of course, Gary, you're gonna say whatever you want just to get in my pants."
Right.
But then the twins are just speaking in unison, and they're like, "Yeah, and how did you feel about what he said, or did you believe him?" And then just getting more menacing, and just right in the nick of time they come. And I love how much damage was caused by that fight, but like nobody inside was aware of what was going on. Like, how loud was this friggin' bar? They're like breaking the
No,
fence and
they're all
tables and
wasted.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, they're not listening. And yeah, it's great. That scene is so fun, and it's such a different fight, especially when one of the twins has like feet hands.
Oh my god. Yeah, that was nightmare fuel. It was like what, Toy Story?
Yeah, it's very very twisted
Yeah.
and very very funny. And after that, of course, Sam is along for the ride as we get into our next scene, the Beehive fight, which is of
Yes.
course where we meet Pierce Brosnan, who plays the great Dr. Shepard, who was a high school teacher of theirs. And they go looking for advice, only to find out that this society, the network they call it, they only want to make things perfect and pure, and Gary and his gang are messing it up. So they have a nasty brawl, a nasty bar fight. And when I was looking at this scene, Simon Pegg, his fighting style reminded me so much of Drunken Master. And
Yeah.
I know they said they were inspired by Jackie Chan martial arts, but just there's a
Mhm.
bit with him, try to catch a catch some beer, and People are still
He's
elbowing
trying to
off of
drink
him.
his same pint, just keeps getting
Yeah.
spilled all over the place. It's like, damn it, over and over.
Yeah, it's another. I mean, Edgar Wright has kind of perfected his action choreography at this point. Again, shout out to Scott Pilgrim. So we get to see a lot of that here, and it's fun seeing like all these, like we said, all these great actors as action heroes. It makes me wish Rosamund Pike did a lot more of this, but then she would go on to scare the shit out of us next year with Gone Girl.
Yeah.
So I mean, shout out to Rosamund Pike.
Yeah.
I think she's great. I don't know. Have you seen Saltburn?
I have not, but I mean, I know of it.
Of it, yeah.
But yeah.
We won't get into the gory details, but she's great in that. And yeah, the movie goes on, and all of these we can get into this now. All of the bars represent something that happens in this movie. Edgar Wright loves his foreshadowing, and we talked about this a little bit in Shaun of the Dead, where Ed lays out the entire plot at the Winchester. Likewise, all the bars lay out what's about to happen in this film. So bear with me, all. So we'll be quick. The first post, of course, that's the first bar they go to. The old familiar. The second bar looks exactly like the first bar. And I think Martin Freeman made a statement about that called it starbucking. Like, oh, all these pubs are starting to look the same, starting to get gentrified.
Yep.
And then we have the famous cock. That's the only one where Gary is banned.
Right.
Yeah, I think they got in a fight there, so he's a
Oh my
famous
god.
cock,
Yeah.
of course. And we have the cross hands, as we mentioned. That's when the aliens first show up, and the band has to work together. And maybe it's a reference to the hands. The
It's where they
aliens
first
love to.
throw hands. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, the aliens love
yeah.
putting your
Fair
hands
enough.
in your
Yeah.
face. And then, of course, we have the good companions, and that's when that was the Doors montage, as I mentioned, where they're pretending to have fun, pretending to be good companions. Edgar Wright's very clever, I know. The trusty servant, that's where we meet Mr. Green, who used to be their weed man back in
Yeah.
the
The
day.
Reverend Green. Yeah.
The Reverend Green, as I said, and he used to be the man, and now he's an informant working for the aliens. So he was their trusty servant, and they ratted him out. um, and then we get into the two-headed dog. Of course, we mentioned the twins, and now we can get into some stuff, some new shit. So the mermaid. Earlier in the film, the gang reminisces about three women they had crushes on, known as the Mondelez Sandwich. And in this club, we get to see them, and just like the mermaids of old stories, they start to lure in Andy and Gary into this dance, and that's when we find out everything isn't as clear as it seems in this town, because this is the big exposition dump thanks to Basil. The
Right.
I know that's my man from Harry Potter, the crazy old cat dude. I think he was in Game of Thrones too. He was in a lot of stuff,
I
but
mean, I wouldn't be surprised. You mean a British actor was in Game of Thrones? Oh, Andy's dead.
and Harry Potter,
Yeah.
Game of Thrones and Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings. You're in one of those if you're in the UK.
Absolutely.
But yeah, he explains to Stephen that these aliens have taken these people and replaced them, in a place where nobody really ages. So we start to see these beautiful young women as a marmalade sandwich, knowing that it's been 20 years since they've looked like that, and it gets really spooky when we find out that one of Sam's crushes, Adrian King, who died, shows up in this club.
Yeah.
And she's like, "Oh no, that's the red light for her." So
Yep.
that's when the story starts to pick up, and that's where we get into the beehive, where we get into that big fight that we mentioned, and then we have the King's head, where they have to prove that they're not a robot, and Gary King smashes his head against a wall to prove that he's not one of them. We haven't even gotten to the nicknames yet. There was a great scene where they talk about the nick. They call them blanks, but
Yeah.
there's a great like running gag where they're trying to come up with a name for these people.
And I think wait, wasn't that undercut with a fight going on, or I forget what else was going on simultaneously while they were going through with the naming?
Yeah. I think that was when Gary and
As a matter of
Sam
fact,
were
yeah.
outside. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So and one of my favorites is when Nick Frost says "Smashy, smashy, Eggman." I wrote that down. I thought that was a great
They
joke.
just
It
keep
was
cutting
stupid.
back, like, they've clearly been talking about this for entirely too long, not to mention one of them said blanks earlier on. It was, like, one of
Yeah.
the first things, and, of course, it's, like, one of those things you say a thing, and then you're like, "No, I can do better than this," so you just keep on going, and then you're just like, "Nah, not good."
No, no, we're drawing a blank, and there it is.
Yep.
And after, of course, we get to the king's head. That's when everything goes to shit. Peter gets taken away, and it's Gary. It's pretty much Gary and Andy at the end. And Gary is so determined. And this is where the story kind of, you're laughing. This is where it kind of gets sad because he is an addict, and everybody's kind of like, everybody else has jobs. Like all his friends, like Sam and all these people have great jobs, great wives, great kids, and Gary is still out here trying to just get drunk. So this is where the dramatic climax comes to a head where, Gary is we start to see just how sick and how sad this addiction is. So and it kind of I was like, damn, I was laughing. Why did y'all do that to me? so
How
it
dare you make me
so
feel.
that's where we get to the hole in the wall. Very self-explanatory. There's a hole in the wall, and finally we get to one of the final scene and one of my favorite scenes that I wrote down in the world's end, where we meet the network, the grand operator, voiced again by Davy Jones himself, Bill Nighy, and it ends in a great climax with the gang just basically cursing out the aliens.
"We don't like
basically,
being told what to do." Yeah.
basically, you're not going to replace us. You can't make anything perfect. We're here. We're human. Humans. I forgot the line. He said, like, this country was made by fuck ups, and that makes me proud.
Yeah.
There's so many quotables in that line alone. Like, to err is human. So, err. So, and basically, in a great twist of events, usually the alien species would just like blow them up, but it's just like, all right, fuck it. You got it.
I think that's one thing that, like, almost took me out my initial viewing, like, "What? That's it?" Like, literally all the it's just, what, appealing to authority?
Yeah,
Because I mean, because like, they had them completely surrounded and outnumbered, but I guess they did specify earlier on, they're like, "We don't like to do this, like, yes, we have been violent, but, that wasn't our main approach. At first, we just replaced the people that we needed to, people who are influential, people who would, have you less likely to rock the boat and just make things nicer." But it's just like, again, that also harkens back to the Starbucking, like, some things are just too perfect, and it takes you out of it.
exactly.
No.
And of course, spoiler alert, the world actually ends. We are sent back to the Stone Age, and all these characters have gone on to live lives. But Gary has decided, not to let the party in. He gets a cowboy hat, he gets a sword, which is Gandalf's actual replica. I looked that up. He gets a sword, he starts hanging out with his robot homie clones, and just starts wreaking havoc. I would watch that movie at the end.
Oh,
I don't know
absolutely.
what the story would be, but Gary King and his gang of robots taking on the apocalypse, I would be super down for that.
I mean,
It would never
essentially
happen.
we have seen Mad Max, but I do love that
Yeah,
at that point he's also, kind of confronted his alcoholism as well. He's like, "You know what? I'll take water. I'm in it for sport." And it's
five
also
waters,
wild that,
please.
to bring that up just about Gary because, the entire movie, he's the epitome of like peaked in high school, did absolutely nothing with his life. And it makes you think of, when things like The Walking Dead were really big and all these people were just like, "Oh man, I couldn't wait for apocalypse. I would thrive." Da, da, da. And of course, Shaun of the Dead already was a zombie apocalypse, but that was contained. Like they had solved
Right.
it at the end. But this, you actually put Gary King in the scene where, like, you could tell he'd be that person who would be on Facebook talking about some. Oh yeah, well, zombies come out. I'm gonna be ready. Da 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 da. Not just in the right wing like fringe. Oh, I've stockpiled arms against the government, but you could see he actually thrived in this environment. He's like at the end of the world now I actually am a fucking king.
Exactly. So, are there anything in this movie that didn't really click for you? You're like, yeah, that scene could have, yeah, you could have cut that out.
So that's the thing. which this is something I put thought into. There was no again, it's hard to think of a scene that didn't have a place there or didn't serve a purpose as far as pushing the story forward. Because I didn't even think of the significance of all the names of the bars, you know. Because really, it's just that
Mhm.
until the more like supernatural sci-fi things start happening, you're like the premise itself was a little bit loose. Like it really was just Gary King trying to unite everybody to reattempt the bar crawl, but it's like, you know, why now? What's going on? And even then it's just, and until
Yeah.
you find out that his mom is still very much alive, or at least was at that point in the movie, you know, you're like, okay, well, this was the glue. This was what tied together. This was how he convinced these people to leave their lives, their otherwise productive, successful lives, just to go get drunk with him.
Yeah, and also it's funny you mentioned that mom bit because it brings one of my favorite lines. It's like my mom could be dead, like for reals this time.
For real.
Like Gary is so childish. I
It's
wrote
like, I
there's
know
just
I
so
cried
many
wolf
quotes.
about it before, but
One of my favorite moments is when they I think when they hit the first post and he finds out that Andy, who doesn't drink, the Nick Frost character,
no.
who is sober and through a series of unfortunate events breaks that streak. But in the beginning, he's the one who orders a water, and Gary goes like, he's like a creature of your stature drinking fucking rain. He's like a
Yes. Oh
lion
my
eating
god.
hummus.
Man, I saved that quote exactly because it was really funny because that happened at the famous or no, yeah.
The first
He said
post,
that, and then at the famous cock is where, you know, he was banned. But I
yeah.
wrote down that quote: "A man of your legendary prowess drinking fucking rain," because alcoholics will really clown you for drinking water, and then Gary proceeded to drink three strangers' pints at the famous cock just to get it. So he
Uh,
was the only person who actually
bruh.
drank at the third bar because he was banned.
Look,
And even then, it was a technicality. It was a table outside. These people just left like three half-finished beers.
you
And he's
know how
like,
long
"Hey,
I've
you know
been
what?
out
This
there.
equals a pint." Yeah.
See, we've all had our wild nights. I had some nights in college, but if you just start drinking out of other people's
Never that wild. That's
cups,
another one of those moments where you're just
go
like,
home,
"Coronavirus!" Just
go home. That's enough.
especially
You've
now,
done
like,
enough,
no,
sir.
you are an alcoholic for real, for real. You know, it's like people who just pick up
We
random cigarette butts on the ground, like, no,
we got to call your mom, man. You can't hang out with
for
us.
real this time.
That's gross. Some of the other notes I got here. Shout out to the great Pierce Brosnan. The
Yep.
second
Second
007.
Bond, yeah,
Yes,
in
after
the
the
Cornetto
great
Trilogy.
Sir Timothy Dalton in Hot Fuzz is great. And yeah, I mean, it's just something about like I think if I had to pick, I think Brosnan was the first Bond I grew up with. I'm not a big 007 fan, but I
Yeah, I
remember
mean, he
being
was
there.
Bond, like, when I was born, at least. That was the
Yeah,
first Bond I was familiar with because he was current, you know, it's like, "Oh, yeah, this guy's cool, he's in a movie with Halle Berry," like, "What?"
my cousins played
Yeah.
GoldenEye, so
Mhm.
yeah, shout out to Pierce Brosnan and one of my, I love the recurring themes. I love the soundtrack about freedom and
Yeah.
just want to do what you want. The opening quote, like we want to be free. We want to be free to do what we want to do. We want to get loaded. We want to have a good time. And just what the price of that freedom costs you. You can't be
Right.
free forever, Gary. Edgar Wright said he was influenced by movies like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, of course,
Yeah.
uh, John Carpenter's The Thing, and The Stepford Wives. And you can see, as with all of Edgar Wright's movies, those influences are
Mhm.
painted on the wall. They said the giant robot walking was influenced by the Queen cover, News of the World. Very big
Okay.
Queen fans. Of course, Queen, Don't Stop Me Now, Shaun of the Dead. See, it's all
Yeah.
connected. And
Put it back.
yeah, and
Let's see, as
uh,
far as music, the one I wanted to point out, when they got to, The Beehive, when they first sit down with Shepard,
mhm.
"Here's Where the Story Ends" by the Sundays, I don't even.
Yes,
Yes, like, that's one of my favorite songs
that's
from the
the
'90s that I didn't discover until much later, and it didn't even stand out to me when I first watched that movie, but no, that song used to play a good bit when I worked at Tuesday Morning, and, you know, just on
yeah.
our, like, pre-approved work mix, so, like, now my ears perked up, I'm like, "What?" I ran it back, I'm like,
That's a
"Yeah!"
okay. I'm so glad you brought that up because when I heard it, like I was like on the bed and I had like a meerkat response. Like my head peeked up. I was like,
Right.
I remember hearing this because
That Jay-Z in the
I
studio. It's that little souvenir of a
yeah, she
terrible
went
year.
crazy.
Just yes.
She had the voice of an angel. Shout
Uh-huh.
out to the Sundays. Here's where the
Yeah.
story ends. When I was working at the
Mhm.
99-cent store, much like you, just some of those great nights. That's the thing about working retail. It can be slow as hell, but you'll just hear great
Yeah.
music. So I'm hearing stuff from like I'm hearing that. I'm hearing like they play "Kiss from a Rose" a lot. It was
Nice.
awesome. They play,
Yeah.
you got to play all the '90s hits. You got to play
Mhm.
Mambo Number Five. Got to throw in a
Yeah.
little Spice Girls. You know what I'm saying? A little
See,
Melissa
the greatest one
Etheridge.
for me from that job was, Strawberry Letter 23 by the Brothers Johnson, which, I mean, we could have our own separate thing about, like,
Oh, see,
covers that
you had a
outdo the
black manager.
original. That is oh, man, no, it surprised me because the work mix was such a toss-up, you know? You had bangers like that, the Sundays, you had Sade in there, but then you also had, like, this dry, aggressively Caucasian-ass cover of, "Use Me" by Bill Withers, you know? It's like,
Oh God. Oh
you
no.
forget yeah.
We don't need to get into that.
I'm like, "Who is this,
Don't
Chad
touch
Kroeger and
Bill.
Avril Lavigne?" Just, you know?
Don't touch Bill Withers, dog. You can't do that.
Man, like, trying
But
to put
yeah,
on some grit, like, "Come on, baby, baby." Like, no, just, it feels so forced, man, no.
God.
You have used up my patience. You've used me up.
That was good. Good job.
Man,
I'm glad you brought up the music because Edgar Wright and Simon Pegg said that the soundtrack was basically influenced by the music they were listening to at this time in their lives.
yeah,
Because the script started out as a story in '95 with basically the same premise, but it was basically just the first minute of that movie of The World's
yeah,
End, just that whole montage of them being younger. But he waited a little bit to age them up to deal with it, kind of mirror his past experiences.
right.
Same with Simon Pegg. And one of the last notes I got here is Simon Pegg says Gary King is probably his favorite character that he's ever played.
Huh. Well, yeah, I mean,
I,
I could see that just as far as how much fun you have with a character like that, you know? And it's just like, he's a piece of shit, you know, throughout, but the under all of that, under all of the booze, you know, there is a heart in there. But I will
yeah,
say that's gotta be, like, one of the most fun kinds of characters to play just because you already know from the start that he ain't shit, so it's just like, where do you go from there? He can only redeem himself if you already think the worst.
exactly.
Yeah.
And yeah, I would say yeah, out of all of Simon Pegg's performances, I would say this Gary is probably one of my favorites. Although like I love I love him in Mission Impossible. I love him in
Oh, yeah.
Star Trek movies. But I think Gary, it's not only him at his comedic best, but we really got a chance to see him uh, dramatically, flex. And it's funny because earlier this year, spoiler alert, Simon Pegg has a great performance in The Boys this season, and everybody's like, "Oh my
Yes.
God, Simon Pegg can act," and I
Yeah,
was like,
no, that man, like,
"Yeah,
he's been
we
doing
kind of knew
I
that."
will say that's still probably, like, the closest he ever really brought me to tears, like, by himself, you know?
Yeah, he's
Oh,
incredible, and
man, it
I
was great.
can't wait to see where he goes next. We're gonna get up on out here, but first, two more things. Our fan cast, our 2024 fan cast, putting movies of old in today's lens. I have a list as well. For this one, I tried to not go with the obvious. I was thinking like, remember that show Skins? I was thinking of just young
Yes.
British Hollywood as opposed to like seasoned character actors.
Mhm.
So first and foremost, for my Gary King, I went with Dan Stevens, who is having a hell of a year. You have seen him in Abigail. He is with Hunter Schafer in Cuckoo. You might remember him, the show Legion, the X-Men show on FX with Aubrey Plaza, which is
Mhm.
awesome. He's just one of those guys, man, who is effortlessly funny, but can still bring the drama. I gotta watch The Guest this year. I have a long Halloween list of movies I haven't seen yet. So him, after seeing him and Abigail, and looking forward to watching Cuckoo, I can't wait to see what he does next. For Peter, Eddie Martin's kind of wimpy, character. You need somebody who's kind of not a wimp, but kind of, the quiet one, the
A
weakling.
bit
And
simple, yeah, a bit, you know,
yeah,
someone who, you know, if he's out with his wife, you could tell he's the one who needs somebody to be like, he ordered mashed potatoes just because
Yeah,
he's not
that
about
kind
to
of
speak
guy.
up for himself. You know, he's just like, well, yeah, it seemed like the right thing to do at the
And for that
time.
one, I went with one of my favorite actors right now, Riz Ahmed, who Oscar nominee. Just watch Nightcrawler, watch Sound of Metal.
Sound of
Uh,
Metal,
he
baller.
is amazing, and I think he'd be really fun in that. For Oliver, oh man, the stiff, uptight uh, Martin Freeman character, I went with another great Brit, the great Nicholas Hoult. I mean, this guy has been acting
Yes.
forever. I mean, About a Boy,
Hmm.
Mad Max, Warm
Wasn't he
Bodies.
also in Skins, if I'm not mistaken?
Yes, he was. The
'Cause yeah,
Minions.
because like, funny enough, I thought about him for Oliver, or also for Steven, just because I felt like they're not the same character, but most actors
Mm,
that I could think of to do one could have easily done the other.
right, and of
Yeah.
course Nicholas Hoult. Like I said, just you know him, and he's going to be Lex Luthor. So if you don't know him, you're going to know him soon.
Hell yeah.
Um, and as Steven, of course, as the cool guy, I went with Andrew Garfield, somebody we really don't see enough in comedies. I mean, what's there to say about Andrew Garfield? It's Andrew Garfield, Spider Man, Social Network. And I
Yeah.
feel like we need him in more comedies when he's not trying to get an Oscar because he's been in really
Right.
sad movies, and I need him to have some fun
Like,
and
can he
truth.
have a good day?
Like, I'm reading
Like, he
reviews for
never
this
stopped being
movie.
Spider-Man, because Peter Parker very rarely gets to, like, have a happy ending himself. He just saves the day for other people.
And I'm reading reviews for this movie he has with Florence Pugh, We Live in Time, and everybody's just like, "This is the saddest movie I've ever seen." Like, there's a story like the camera operator had to take a break; he was sobbing so
Oh my
hard. I
god.
was like, "Oh God, Jesus!" I'll see it,
Can
but
you not
Jesus.
sob on the
Real quick,
lens?
I got a few more here. For Andy, the straight man, the Nick Frost character, another Skins alumni, another great British actor, the great Daniel Kaluuya, who needs to be in more comedies
Yes.
when he's not making awesome Jordan Peele movies. When I speaking of Jordan Peele, I thought about Nope, and I thought about his character as OJ, how he's very just stoic and
Yeah.
quiet, doesn't really open up much. And I thought that energy could translate great for Andy, and as well as when Andy makes the flip and goes bonkers. I haven't seen we haven't seen Kaluuya go nuts yet in a movie, so
Yeah.
I would really love to see him kind of just lose it in that sense. I feel like he'd be really great at that.
You know,
And we
you're
got to
right, because I don't know, I feel like most of his characters, like, it's not just that I'm biased because I like the guy, but, you know, it's just most things he does in the movie, you're like, "You know what? Yeah, no, I could this is a reasonable thing to happen right here." Like, he
yeah,
very much portrays the everyman pretty well. I mean, he did a great job as Fred Hampton even, and even then that was, like,
great movie.
sympathetic just because the whole time you're like, "Man, he was trying to do all these great things, and he got killed for it." But
But
shoot,
we'll
no,
talk
even,
about
like,
Judas and the Black
Black
Messiah one
Mirror.
day.
Yes. But, like, even, like, Black Mirror was one of the first things I remember seeing him in, and just, like, even there, that's just, it's very I'm hard pressed to think of a Daniel Kaluuya decision in a movie
we
that I disagreed with or,
we
didn't
we
make
get a
sense
little
to me.
bit of crazy in Widows, which he's great in.
Okay.
We get a little bit of crazy in voice acting when he's Spider Punk and
Oh,
Across the
yeah, yeah,
Spider Verse.
absolutely. Mhm.
So I
Hobie.
know it's there. I would just love to see him in that way. And last but not least, as Sam, the Rosamund Pike character, somebody, all these people are like all these actors are characters who have been in franchises that I need them to get out of. So
Yeah.
last but not least, for Sam, I went with Daisy Ridley from, of course, Rey from Star Wars. Somebody I would love to see in that kind of. She wasn't really a damsel in distress. I would say she held her own, but I feel
Yeah.
like the tag along, the girlfriend. I feel like she'd be really funny in
Mm,
that type of role.
yeah,
So
and I mean,
Steven.
and Sam was a real well-written character just because, like, you know, she had to be clued in, and it took a little convincing, like I said, because of the messenger, but once she was there, she was on board, she was a team player. It was really
Yeah,
just like because, I mean, even her first appearance where she's talking to Oliver on the phone, just like, "Oh, yeah, who all's there? Okay, cool, you're with the guys, and and Gary. Hey,
oh,
Gary."
Gary's here.
Yeah, right. Just, oh.
Yeah. So Steven, present us with your fan cast.
Okay, my fan cast, for the roles of Gary and Andy respectively, this feels like a toss-up. Well, for one, I largely Americanized mine. Just because I feel like, alcoholism is worldwide. You really could do this
Bar
virtually
crawls are
anywhere
worldwide.
that you have like all these bars within reasonable walking or cab distance of each other.
And there's a lot of
Um,
small
so
towns.
right, oh, absolutely. So for Gary and Andy respectively, I have James Rode Rodriguez and DeLay Hill, of course, Sean and Gus from Psych respectively.
Shout out to
Um,
Psych.
Right. And so, James, like it's really, if you've seen Psych, it's kind of self-explanatory because Sean Spencer is kind of a Gary character, except he's not an alcoholic, but a lot of people who grew up with him and who know him in his adult life and meet him that way are just like, okay, this guy's full of shit, like whatever. And DeLay Hill, would work as Andy just because his Burton Guster has, the more serious job before he gets convinced into going on all these adventures. So I would, again, really love, he's another person you love to see take control of the scene just because you're used to seeing him be like a side character for so long. And he's like, no, this is not okay. Do that. Just like, and he starts going off.
Mhm.
So yeah, for that reason, I have a lot of love for that. Cause I mean, Andy was my MVP of the whole movie. Cause
Yes.
again, once he was in and he was just like, all right, fuck it. And he just like cleared 5 shots by himself, turned the last one
Locked
upside down.
in.
It's like, all right, well, we're in it. This is what we're going to do. I have no choice at this
Hey,
point.
nobody has a better idea, so fuck it. One of my
Right,
favorite lines.
exactly. So my Steven, I gotta go, even though they spelled my name incorrectly, whatever. I I think I'm gonna give that one to Zac Efron, just as somebody who
Okay.
again is like playing the pretty boy, but who has done enough in his career to vary himself, like just from being pretty. Like he's got chops for real.
No,
Um,
Zach's the man.
so yeah. So I feel like he definitely could play off into the whole like, yeah, I've got a 26-year-old girlfriend and yada yada, and
Oh, for
I've
kind of like his
I've
neighbor's
still
character.
done things with my life, but I never got over you, Sam, girl from childhood. So yeah.
Yeah, and shout out, yeah, Zach is because I was thinking about Neighbors today, and I was thinking about how
Okay.
funny
Yeah.
that movie was and how funny he was. I think that was kind of like the moment for me where it switched. Like, okay, High School Musical's dead. This guy is
Right.
actually gonna be somebody. And watch the Iron Claw, everybody. It's so good. He's so good.
Speaking
Should
of
have got an
saddest
Oscar for that.
movies ever, but yeah.
Saddest. Oh my god, not a dry eye in the house.
Yeah.
Jesus.
We're
Go
men.
ahead with your
It
cast
still
first.
shed tears. Yeah. So
Jesus.
then for Oliver, I'm gonna switch it up again. Some people might be mad at me because he's black, but no. So I got to go with first time Emmy winner Lamorne Morris as of tonight
Woo!
as Oliver.
As
I
we
feel
are
like
recording this, the
yeah,
Emmys are going on, and Lamorne Morris, who we love from New Girl, is Winston, just won his first Emmy for Fargo, and I love that. I love him. He's so funny. Like
yeah,
the one of the best things. I like my New Girl opinion. I think everybody agrees. Like nobody cares about Zoe Deschanel. No offense, Zoe. Like
yeah.
the entire supporting cast
The
washes
supporting
that,
cast
like
carried the
carries that
show.
show.
Well, I mean, the biggest point of this is so Zoe Deschanel had a baby in real life, and I feel like they wrote it cleverly into the show, but to not break up their momentum, I feel like it was one of the best reasons to temporarily write a character out of a show, like how they handled it,
Mm-hmm.
with having her character Jess being like sequestered on a jury for a murder trial or something. So there were only like a couple times where you could tell that they were trying to hide the fact that she was pregnant,
Mm-hmm.
just because the character Jess, like, throughout the majority of the show, was single and dating kind of thing.
Oh
Um,
yes.
but like they had the supporting cast carry the show with the addition of like Megan Fox for a little bit, which I thought was a weird toss up. But I mean, but again, it still
She
worked.
did
I
all
felt like the
right.
show didn't lose a lot. Well, right. And the show didn't really lose a lot of its momentum just because of the Winston and Schmidt dynamics, Winnie and Cece mess arounds, Nick Miller, like so. Again, it was a great show that still justified its 7-season run and handled a lot of those things in
7 seasons.
stride. But yeah, but no, but I want to see Lamorne do so many more things. He's also playing Garrett Morris, no relation, in the upcoming like SNL
Saturday
1975
night.
movie. Yeah, Saturday
Yes.
night.
Very excited.
Um, I'm very excited for that. So I feel like he would be good for Oliver as able to play the straight man, but still just being, uh, similar to DeLay Hill, but it's not that like Winston and Gus are not the same character, but they are two actors that I could almost see playing some of each other's roles. But the same could be
Hmm.
said for a lot of even the original cast of The World's End, just because they're all so good in separate things and together that they really could have like picked up each other's slack if they needed to.
Exactly.
So anyway, after all that Lamorne glazing, let's say for
And the
Peter, I
new
was kind
girl
of split.
advertisement.
Yeah, right. Well, so for Peter, I was kind of split on Nicholas Braun from Succession, but also
My man.
I grew up watching him from like Disney stuff and whatnot. But him or Paul Dano, just people who play awkward very well. Have played some kind of weirdo
Very squirrely
characters.
people.
Yes. Oh, squirrely is a good term for it.
Yeah.
Um, because I mean, yeah, and I mean, Paul Dano is incredible. He can play, unhinged psychopaths to just really, awkward loners, not in the school shooter sense, but in
Yeah.
the, but also,
Something's
yeah, if he
off.
so chose, I mean, he was a great Riddler. Prisoners is one of my favorite performances of him, where he disturbed me the most.
Great
Um,
movie. I
yeah,
got to
but
shout
I
out
feel
Love
he
and
could also
Mercy.
still right. But he could also, he also has chops for comedy when you think of things like Swiss Army Man with Daniel Radcliffe, or like wasn't he also in Little Miss Sunshine?
Yep.
Uh, so yeah,
Ruby
so
Sparks, underrated flick,
right.
very
So I
funny.
feel either of those are kind of like a toss up right there. And then for Sam, going off of Lamorne Morris just because like yeah, Sam and Oliver are related. I actually chose Yvonne Orji, aka Molly from
Ooh.
Insecure.
Ooh.
I feel like that worked, especially a lot of my decision on that was based off of her character in Insecure, just in the sense that she was, the millennial professional, who didn't always have the greatest luck with men, but a good bit of that had to deal with her own high standards. And that's not saying that, she was
Hmm.
wrong for having them. But just basically she had her shit together or was really good at projecting it that way. And that really gave me a lot of that Sam energy. So then for
Second
Lamorne
dig.
Morris to also be playing off of like, no, I don't want you dating my sister, Sean Spencer, aka James, right? So, I felt good about that, and this was kind of the easiest of the Cornetto trilogy for me to fan cast, but well, the
Hmm.
easiest and hardest just because I kind of had a couple options for some of the characters.
Right. Yeah. And it was. I would say I didn't. I when I was approaching it, I was kind of like, damn. I don't. All these actors are so good. So for like, you kind of have to like remake it in your own image. So like, I would love to see like a young, like that's my young 2000s British Hollywood taking your sitcom takeover
Mm,
in America. One Night in
yeah,
Boston.
right.
All right, last but not least, 1 out of 10. Where would you rank this film, The World's End?
Um, so I gotta say, my opinion of it did improve over the first time I watched it. It's not that I ever didn't like it, and especially thinking of movies like This Is the End being released the same year, um, it really was overshadowed in theaters. Um, I'm pretty sure I gave I gave Hot Fuzz a 9, 9.5.
Yeah.
Um, then I think The World's End, I cannot in good conscience give stronger than an 8.5. But partly that just has to do with my attachment to it, which again, like it's still great. Anyone who had never seen an Edgar Wright movie before, it would not be the first Edgar Wright movie that I showed them, but I still have
Hmm.
yet to see Edgar Wright do a movie that I wouldn't recommend to somebody.
Correct.
So, I feel like it's not, and I think it's getting more culturally relevant over time, especially with like the rise of AI and things. So that you were getting at,
Yeah.
but just where I was and what it was when it came out. There are a lot of things to love about the movie. It's a great time. It's not. Well, it hasn't been able to like sit as long as Shaun of the Dead to be as beloved either.
Hmm.
So I gotta say, of the Cornettos, Hot Fuzz probably takes it for me as far as being the best rounded. But The World's End had the best fights, like the best hand to hand combat. That
Yes.
was the most satisfying for me to watch, especially off the heels of Scott Pilgrim. Like you definitely saw everything that Edgar Wright kind of like learned and also refined from that experience.
Exactly.
So
And
anyway, all
how would
these
it?
words later, 8.5.
8.5. I'm with you on 8.5. Yeah. As far as the Cornettos, I think Hot Fuzz is the funniest. It's the well. It's like it's the one that's most universal. And I think I was kind of like you because when this movie hit when I was younger, I was like, it's all right. It's not Scott Pilgrim. But I think as you get older, you start to have those feelings of nostalgia and going back to your hometown and hanging
Right.
out with your friends. You start hanging out with people who are getting sober. You start thinking to yourself, "Oh shit." That I think that's the movie. Like I said earlier, I said it's his most mature film. I
Yeah.
think it's his most introspective. I think it's his most like it's dark. It talks about some real things, and yeah, I just it doesn't reach the comedic heights that Hot Fuzz and Scott Pilgrim might reach, but there's still moments that I would put on. I would put it on in the background
Absolutely.
if somebody
Hmm.
like if it was on TV, I wouldn't turn it off. But
Absolutely.
I just think that you know Edgar Wright has so many hits that I would watch before this,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about a few coming up. But I think that I think it's a good. I think every director needs their movie where they get personal, and I think
Yeah.
this is the one where he was like the most personal, and yet
Would you
was
say
still
this is
able to
his Mr.
balance
Morale?
the manic energy. In a way, yeah, yeah. In a
Something
way, because
I
he's
didn't
dealing
think
with
about
these
that
things
until
about
just this moment, but
yeah.
yeah. So I will
In a
say
way,
that,
it was
like,
very
yeah,
yeah. It's very yeah. He's because Gary at the end he was talking about unaliving himself and you know he's like this is all I got like the world's in this is all I
right.
got. My mom doesn't call me. Like I had to lie to get my friends to come hang out with me. Like this is the only way I know how to live. You think about it, you're like God damn. But yeah, but I mean, like, but it's a happy ending. It's it may be
Yeah,
the end of the world, but these characters, nobody died, and if they did die, they came back as robots. So everybody turned all right in the end. And
yeah.
yeah, I would agree with 8.5 because, like I said, I love a lot more Edgar Wright films more than I love this one, but it doesn't mean I
Mhm.
don't love it any less. So
Right, and that's
with
my
that,
thing. So it might be my least favorite Edgar Wright film, but if The World's End is your worst movie, you're doing a pretty damn good job. Like,
right, there are certain directors who would
oh,
wish they could make this movie.
yes.
And yeah, so that's going to do it for us tonight, folks. The World's in 2013. Did you love it? Did you hate us? Let us know. Support us in the comments. We love you. Thank you so much for tuning in. We got 3 Edgar joints left. We're almost there. And next week it's going to get controversial because we're talking about an Edgar Wright movie with some pretty interesting characters in it. Of course, we're talking about Baby Driver 2017. Uh, I I'm gonna save it for the show, but it's gonna be a fun one. I want to try to get as many people as I can on that one. Just we might have to get into some heavy stuff, but till then, continue to support us, like us on Facebook. I'm gonna come with an Instagram page. I promise. I'm on Instagram now at Jamarco again. I'm gonna leave it in the comments. Steven, if you want anybody to follow you, let them know.
Catch
If
me at
not, you want to
Midas
see off the
Whale
grid.
901. Yeah.
Yes, we're on Instagram. Links are going to be in the subsection right there. But until we see you next week, I've been Jamarco Shaw. This has been Stephen Dinkins. Thank you so much for tuning in to Everybody's a Critic. And we'll see you next time. Peace.
Ka-chow.
Beautiful.